Everyone, it is the top of the hour. Welcome to the sixth Adaptive Cloud Community Call. I'll go ahead and get started right now. I know we usually wait a couple minutes for people to trickle in, but I think we have a pretty packed agenda today. So I'll go through the normal spiel and we can go ahead and get started. So if this is your first time joining the call, welcome. This call is focused on the Adaptive Cloud Community product and service updates. So topics range from Azure Arc to Azure Stack HCI to the IoT space, AKS. Presenters today will go over their topics and then we'll engage in a Q&A session at the end, the typical deal if you're a returning attendee. Feel free to drop your questions in the Q&A chat. I'm not totally sure if it's working right now, so if not, you can just use the normal chat to drop questions for presenters, or if you want to hold on to your questions, you can wait until the end. We have these calls the first Wednesday of every month, so yeah, feel free to join our next call. Like I said, the first Wednesday of every month. And as a reminder, this call is non-NDA, so feel free to publicly discuss all these products, services, updates, all of that stuff. That's all available to you all. Flipping to the next slide here, this is our GitHub. I'm sure you all are aware of this now by now, but this is our public repository. So you should be able to go and access this now if you want. All of our meeting links, all of the calendar invites, also all there. So it kind of acts as a one-stop shop for all of the updates that we have. The next slide here is our YouTube. So like I said, this call is recorded. All of these calls are posted to YouTube. So if you have a colleague or a friend that was interested in attending today but couldn't make it, no worries. You can go to the YouTube page and then check out our recordings there. This one should be posted within the next day or so. We typically upload them the same day. So feel free to check that out. And then moving to the next slide, this is our agenda. I guess one slide got dropped here, but we do have a LinkedIn. I can post the link to that, but we have a LinkedIn group for the Adaptive Cloud community space. So I can, like I said, I'll post that offline, but feel free to join that. There's been updates there recently for product updates, feature releases, that type of stuff. So like I said, I'll post the link then, but can go ahead and hand it over to John.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Let me take control. All right. My name is Jan. I work as a cloud solution architect at Microsoft, and I'm also a core maintainer on the Arc Jumpstart team. So I'm going to take you through the updates for this last month's work on the Jumpstart team. So let's dive into the release highlights first, and then I'm going to take you through the highlights for ArcBox 3.0, which was a major and important release for us in August. So let's first go through the other ones. HCI Box got some features and fixes, so we updated to a newer API version for the HCI deployment and blocking some issues related to upstream related bug fixes. So deploying Kubernetes on top of HCI is one of them. There are also some updates to Agora related to IoT operations. We also updated the Jumpstart assets where you get all of these very nice architecture posters and diagrams. So be sure to check out the latest release there. And finally, and not least, is the Arc-enabled data services August release, which is basically a SQL managed instance where the container images and the Azure CLI extension has been updated. So we have tested that with ArcBox 3.0 and the DataOps flavor. So let me take you through the updates for ArcBox 3.0, which is the new update that we are very excited about. So for those of you who haven't used ArcBox before, this is a sandbox environment for getting hands-on experience with Azure Arc that is used for proof of concepts, pilots, and demo environments for both customers, partners, and internally in Microsoft. So this was one of the first projects inside of the Jumpstart project. So let's take you through the various flavors and have a quick peek at what is new in the different flavors. So the first one is the IT Pro flavor that you might have used before. So what is new here is that we have now added Azure Update Manager. So when you deploy ArcBox, the automation triggers an on-demand assessment. So you have an updated view right from the get-go of any available updates for the Arc-enabled servers. We have also updated the Azure Monitor workbooks that is included in ArcBox. So then you can get the insights into various aspects like Azure Update Manager, compliance, Azure Monitor, and get a holistic view of the IT environment. And we also added a couple of new features into ArcBox IT Pro. One of them is SSH Posture Control that enables you to audit and configure the SSH server security posture on supported Linux distros. And the other one we added was PowerShell remoting to Arc-enabled servers. So now you can leverage PowerShell 7 SSH-based remoting via the Arc agent, and that is also included instructions step by step on how to evaluate that feature within ArcBox. That's IT Pro. The other flavor is the DevOps flavor. So this is intended for users who want to experience Arc-enabled Kubernetes capabilities in this sandbox environment. Here we have multiple GitOps configuration to deploy and configure sample applications. And the new features here is that the ArcBox has now transitioned from using Cluster API or KP into using K3S instead, which is a lightweight Kubernetes distribution for managing Kubernetes cluster. So by switching to K3S, you can benefit from a more lightweight, efficient, and easier to manage Kubernetes solution. Another feature that we have added is Istio, a powerful service mesh that you can use to facilitate blue-green deployments, load balancing, and so forth. So previously, we used something called OSM, or Open Service Mesh, which was deprecated or archived in May of 2023. So that's the reason that we needed a new service mesh, and we chose Istio for this. For DataOps, as I mentioned, that is using SQL managed instance capabilities running on top of Kubernetes that you can test. We have a bookstore application, we have a DB connection application, various sample applications that you can use on top of what is deployed. And ArcBox 3.0 introduces an on-demand SQL migration assessment, so you can provide details on evaluations on how to migrate SQL databases to Azure, for example, managed instance, SQL pass service, or SQL inside of a VM. So that is the highlights for the DataOps. I also wanted to take you through some of the common improvements, and one of the ones we are very excited about is the portal experience that has now been updated, so you can, instead of providing a service principal with a object ID, application ID, or client secret, which was kind of some friction for users when deploying this. This is now no longer needed. Now we are transitioned to use a managed identity, so the onboarding experience and provisioning experience is much more seamless. So that is also very important regarding the deployment and the security posture, of course. You can also notice that we have a new parameter here that is called the VM autologon. So that, let's go to the next slide and we can talk more about that one. So in the past, when you deployed ArcBox and the first time you logged on to the client VM, the Azure VM that is hosting the 5 nested VMs that you get inside of ArcBox IT Pro, for example, you had to log on to trigger the automation scripts that set up the nested VMs and did all of the automation. This is no longer needed if you enable VM autologon, because then the VM will be restarted and the scripts will kick off automatically without the user having to log on to initiate that process. So that will also make deployment much more seamless and easier to use. One other thing, we updated the sample parameters file. So instead of using JSON files, we now use bicep parameter files, much more easier to read and use. So that is very convenient. And there are a lot of other enhancements here that we don't have time to go into detail in. For example, that we have started to use Winget as the package manager instead of Chocolatey. We're using DSC and the desired state configuration to provision VMs and do more declarative configurations instead of just imperative PowerShell scripts. We are using pester tests for testing that the actual onboarding has succeeded, and the user can log on to the VM, and on the desktop you will see BG info presenting the results of those integration tests. So you can immediately see if the deployment was successful or not. You don't have to inspect the log files anymore. So as you can see, there are a lot of other features here that we can't deep dive into in this session. But if you're interested in learning more, check out the release blog post and also the Jumpstart Lightning episode where we talk more in depth about the various features. So really excited about this release. So that was this month's updates from the Jumpstart team. So then we can proceed to the next presenter. Thank you very much.
Oh, fantastic. I think I'm next. Hi, I'm Stephen Pevin. I am the PM for the Azure Container Storage enabled by Azure Arc. This was a product that I've previously been on here to talk about. It used to be called the Edge Storage Accelerator, but we have gone through a name change. We have a logo, and we have some updated public preview information for you today. So Azure Container Storage enabled by Azure Arc. We are a Kubernetes native Arc extension. So if you have an Arc connected cluster, we are ready to go for you. We will provide you with a read-write-many file system. So, multiple applications, multiple users can all connect to us at the same time. We provide durability of data at the edge. So we have a triplication service if you're running on 3 or more nodes. So if a single node goes down, your data will never be lost. And we provide that as an edge storage solution, but we realize the limitations of edge storage, and a lot of times people are running small clusters or on relatively inexpensive or low memory devices. And so we also take care of tiering your data to blob storage, which is effectively infinite, really, increasing your storage capacity. We also handle the file to blob SDK translation. So you write to us as if we were your regular file system at the edge, and we handle that translation up to blob. And we have a bunch of different configurable policies, so you can have flexibility of when and where and how your data ends up and lands and how you consume it. There's a link here for the documentation and installation instructions if you'd like to get started, but I'll continue talking about some of the new stuff we have going, which is edge volumes. So I'll start by just showing you this diagram so you can see the Kubernetes cluster there, and then you can see our Arc extension in the purple box. So down at the bottom, we have the three-way replication of data. So if you have multiple nodes, we virtualize that storage space across the nodes, and then we mount our file system on top of that virtualized storage system. And so then we have different options for what kind of volumes you might want to run. So we have local shared volumes, which are just local storage at the edge, no cloud dependency, no cloud connection, but gives you that durability layer that you might be interested in if you have scratch space, if you're doing temporary storage, if you need for compliance reasons to save your data, if you're doing processing and you don't want to send that data up, if you're any number of reasons you might want local storage at the edge. We have that option. And then we also have these cloud ingest volumes. So we're talking, basically you write to this volume and we will tier that data up to blob, and then we will purge the local copy. A lot of our customers are looking at, when you're trying to expand your storage, once you have a copy that you've verified is in the cloud, most people don't need the edge copy any longer. It's just taking up space. And so we have configurable policies for how long to hold on to that data, how long to wait before you grab it to take it up to blob. So we have different policies there, first in, last in, which data to upload first, which is especially important with disconnection. So we recognize that not everyone has solid network connections all the time. Sometimes they're intermittent. Sometimes, a backhoe takes out your cable line outside your factory, whatever the case may be. And so if that happens, we will continue to write your data locally. And then when the connection comes back up, then we will resume that data upload to the cloud. So it gives you a lot of flexibility as far as getting your data to the cloud. And also we take on the responsibility of managing what that disconnection scenario looks like and making sure that we're uploading things at the proper time. So these are very resource efficient, very low footprint, small footprint solutions that we hope that you'll be excited to try out for us. and for yourself, not just for us. So we also have partnered with the Jumpstart Drops team to have prepackaged configurations for both the local storage and the cloud ingest solutions that you can try out. There's Arc Jumpstart link there. Just to get you started, should make your life much easier. So that's what we have for you today. Pretty high level. Again, here's our installation instructions. I'm Stephen Pepin. If you have questions, please feel free to reach out. I'd love to chat with you. But yeah, public preview. Let's do it. Thank you very much.
Stephen, I think there's one question for you in the chat.
Okay.
I don't know if you have to answer that
I
quickly.
can't see it. Yep.
The question was, any ETA to speak of as when we anticipate / hope container storage will GA?
That is an excellent question that I don't think I am free to talk about on this call because this is public facing, but be sure that, you know, we are moving in that direction. I can't give you an exact timeline on that.
Great, thanks, Stephen. Arnav?
Awesome. Thanks so much. So excited to share some updates on Azure Arc enabled servers. And so with that, we have our connected machine agent update release notes. And so we had our agent 1.45, which released. And so with that, we now have Azure Arc proxy support through HTTP traffic. Additional feedback we got from some customers was challenges with AMA for proxy bypass. So you'll notice that we now have the configurable proxy bypass value for AMA to support AMA VM extension proxy bypass, again supporting the networking connectivity through the connected machine agent. One thing we want to note is we now have this detailed security guidance that we've documented. So we have a security overview for Azure Arc, which includes security deep dives across onboarding and updates, networking security, extension security, such as local agent control capabilities, configuration and remote access recommendations, identity and authorization, data and privacy, as well as security baselines for the connected machine agent for Arc Server. And so we hope this really equips customers and users with a lot of very detailed and helpful security guidance when it comes to making sure that the Arc server deployments are safe and secure. And you also are aware of all of the different security controls that you can leverage both by design and by control for ensuring your Arc server deployment meets your enterprise requirements. So we're quite excited about that detailed security guidance. And obviously there's more to come in terms of formalizing this with more security white papers, webinars, etc., to meet our customer asks. With that, I did want to share something exciting, which is the upcoming preview of a whole host of management capabilities across what we call the Windows Server Azure Arc Management Services. This includes not only Windows Admin Center and Azure for Arc, which you're familiar with, but also new capabilities like remote support and diagnostics, best practices assessment, disaster recovery, bootstrapping, as well as accelerated networking. And so this is an entire set of Windows Server management capabilities that are going to be available at no additional cost for customers enrolling in Windows Server 2025 through the pay-as-you-go option, as well as customers that are enrolling in software assurance for their Windows Server instances. So both of those sets of customers will get this entire gamut of services at no additional cost, and it is gated for those specific customers. So there's a lot of capability here, a lot more details to come, and kind of marketing collateral as well as documentation for each of these. But in the meantime, what we did want to do is, just in the honor of spirit of time, make sure you're able to sign up for the preview. So we have the ak.ms link, ak.ms WSAAM preview, and I'll also drop into the chat contact for Theo, who's driving the entire set of capabilities. So really excited to have this come to fruition, and please looking forward to everyone's feedback and participation in the previews across all of these different management services. So with that, that's a wrap in terms of what's latest from quality and agent release perspective and new capabilities coming up with Azure Arc enabled servers. Thank you so much.
All right. Hey guys, my name is Amir Brady, and I'm a PM on the Edge security team. And today I'll be speaking a little bit about SSH Posture Control. So SSH Posture Control enables you to audit and configure SSH server security posture on supported Linux distros, including Ubuntu, Red Hat, Azure Linux, and more. It integrates seamlessly with the Azure governance services such as Azure Policy and machine configuration. So you can do a couple things, which is first, risk mitigation, which can allow you to reduce the attack surface of an SSHD-based remote management. Ensure compliance with SSHD standards in your industry or organization, and ensure consistent SSHD setup across your fleet for security and productivity. And I wanted to show you guys a little demo about SSH Posture Control today. So let me turn that on now.
Well, hello, everyone. I am Ram Jayaraman. I work as a product manager at Microsoft, and I work on a feature called Trusted Launch for Azure Arc virtual machines. My intention here today is to really share with you more about this feature, and more importantly, have a conversation and see if you're interested in joining a preview of this feature. Looks like we have a good chunk of time left, so I'm going to take some time to go through some of the details here. So Trusted Launch, what is it? I'll start with Azure. For those of you who are familiar, of course, many of you must be familiar with Azure. And if you go create a virtual machine today, you will notice that there's a security type called Trusted Launch that you can choose when you create an Azure virtual machine. And in fact, Azure has made Trusted Launch the default for all new virtual machines in Azure. So what I'm actually focused on here is to bring that Trusted Launch capability to the edge, and specifically in this case, Azure Stack HCI. So what is Trusted Launch and what does it actually provide? Let's get into the details. So when you actually enable or choose Trusted Launch as a security type when you create an Azure Arc virtual machine, what we actually do is we, behind the scenes, enable a bunch of security capabilities. Let me start with the first one, Secure Boot. With Secure Boot, we actually auto-enable Secure Boot right away when you default enable it when you choose Trusted Launch. And with Secure Boot, what you really get is that all the different components that get loaded on the boot chain, they are actually signature verified and integrity checked. So that way you know that the boot components are authorized. And what it really helps is to detect any, essentially find out if there's a malware in the boot path. People talk about rootkits and bootkits. Rootkits are just basically malware that sit along the firmware layer, and bootkits are just malware that sits in the boot path close to the boot loader component. So these firmware malware can easily be prevented using Secure Boot. So we auto-enable that when you choose Trusted Launch. And also when you choose Trusted Launch, we install a virtual TPM device. You may be wondering, what is a TPM? TPM stands for Trusted Platform Module. And on a physical machine, it is a small chip, $1 to $10 chip that is actually there in the motherboard. But since we are talking about virtual machines here, this is a software TPM, an emulated TPM that is presented to virtual machines. Why? What is the TPM? Why is it important? TPM is a secure enclave. It's isolated from the operating system, so it's a place where applications tend to store secrets. They can use it as a crypto processor, and effectively, it gives you a place to securely stash away things that you don't want a hacker who gets into the operating system layer to put a hand into, right? So that's really what a TPM is. And the virtual TPM is offered when you choose trusted launch for the virtual machine. And more importantly, it's not just the fact that we auto-enable or install a virtual TPM device, but more importantly, when that in a failover scenario, in a high availability scenario, imagine you have a failover cluster and you have a virtual machine running on node 1, and at some point it fails over to node, say, 2 or node 3. Now, in a standard RPM today, when the virtual machine moves over, migrates or fails over, the virtual machine's memory state, everything in the disk state, everything moves over. But not the memory state, the disk state moves over, depending on the type of migration. If it's a live migration, memory state also moves over. But my point here is that the virtual TPM state is not actually moved over today in the standard RPM situation. Whereas with trusted launch, what we have done is we move the virtual TPM state along with the VM as the virtual machine moves over to the other node. Why is it important? If you're an application that is running inside the virtual machine and is using the virtual machine in the virtual TPM in some capacity, maybe you want to use it for storing some secrets, or you want the virtual TPM to do some unsealing operation. A lot of different ways you can use the virtual TPM as a secure enclave if you're an application. Now, when that VM moves over and if the virtual TPM state is lost, clearly the application cannot be properly functional, right? And that's effectively what we are solving with trusted launch. And why are we solving it with trusted launch and not in the general case? It's just simply because there's a lot more security angle to it. You have to protect the virtual TPM state on disk and in transit, and there's a lot of security work that has to happen in the background to make it happen. And that is the investment that is that has led us to solve the problem through trusted launch. And as we talk along, you will see eventually where we are going with this, because ultimately we want to enable trusted launch by default across the board, but we are introducing this ability to move virtual TPM systematically with the VM, with trusted launch, and eventually you'll see it'll be a standard part of the RPM as well. Next, I'll talk about guest attestation. So what I mean by that is the ability to know that the virtual machine started in a known good state. Right? Imagine you're an application running inside a VM, or you may be a service that is outside running somewhere, and you just want to know if the virtual machine is of good health. Right? When the virtual machine booted up, there was no firmware malware, or it was not compromised in any way. Right? You want to have some proof of that. Then you can start transacting with that VM. Right? So how do you verify that? And that's essentially what guest attestation is about. So what we really actually do behind the scenes is when the virtual machine boots up, we measure the entire boot path, and the boot measurements are stored in the virtual TPM, and we compare the actual measurements with golden measurements that are stored in Azure Attestation Service, and issue a token only if the measurements match. And this is a pretty powerful feature, because then the relying party could be an application running inside the virtual machine. It could be a service somewhere else. It has a way to see this token issued by this notary service, this attestation service in Azure, and you can trust that and take action based on that. So effectively, you're able to, the VM is able to prove to a relying party that it is of good health, and that's a pretty powerful feature. Now, I'll give you an example how this can be used. I think looking at the audience here, I think many of you probably already are familiar with many technologies that we have at the edge and on Azure. So I'm going to use the Azure Virtual Desktop example. So imagine you have Azure Virtual Desktop, the control plane is in Azure, and you have a bunch of Azure Virtual Desktop sessions running on your Azure Stack HCI on-prem. And if for some reason attacker gets in and compromises the VM image, inserts some malware, and this VM boots up with malware, and in this case, it's a trusted launch RPM. So we measure the boot path, and when the measurements get compared to what's stored in Azure Attestation Service, it fails attestation. Now, who's the relying party here? The Azure Virtual Desktop control plane, right? So what it can do is the Azure Virtual Desktop control plane can actually um, um, block login attempts, make the VM unavailable, and block login attempts to that, and that way you can take proactive actions, right? So imagine an experience where you're a customer and you wake up in the morning, you come to your office, and then you see, hey, wait a second, you get an alert that's saying that there is actually 2 or 3 VMs that failed attestation, and automatically Azure Virtual Desktop made those VMs unavailable and sent you an alert and blocked all login attempts to that VM, right? That's a pretty powerful proactive action that can be taken based on this attestation signal. And that's just one example. And there are so many other ways you can actually use this signal. Azure Virtual Desktop is just one example, right? You can use it for Azure Kubernetes Service. It could be anything. It could be any application, right? That's the point I'm making. It's a pretty powerful feature that allows you to verify boot integrity. So this slide really talks to you about what Arc VMs in general provide. I think some speakers on this call already covered much of what Arc VMs do. Obviously, from a security point of view, you have a centralized place to look at the security and manage security for Arc VMs, and you can do compliance assessments on Arc VMs, and you can actually use Microsoft Defender for continuous monitoring. All of those things come with the power of Azure, right? When you have an Azure Arc enabled VM or a virtual machine, you can engage that power of Azure that's behind it, right? But Trusted Launch essentially builds on top of that. It's just literally a security type, right? An additional capability that you can choose to enable. And when you do, one of the things it does is helps detect malware in the boot path and helps verify that the virtual machine is of good health. And it's not just a one-time thing. We every 4 to 8 hours we renew. The token gets renewed, and you can see the latest status as well. I just want to highlight that part. What Trusted Launch is relative to the RPM in this slide. So this slide here talks to you about the various firmware attacks that have happened over the last few years. It's not an exhaustive list by any means. What we have noticed in the security team is that over the last probably 5 to 7 years, we have noticed an increase in the number of firmware attacks, malware being implanted in the firmware, that type of scenarios in the last 5 to 7 years. So why is that? If you look at the operating system layer today, whether it's Windows or Linux, it doesn't matter. You'll notice that the operating system layer is getting increasingly hardened every day. There's a ton of engineers working to do that work, right? Harden the operating system. If you're an attacker, you're going to scratch your head and say, okay, so what's my easy target here? Clearly, the firmware is the easy target because it is code that boots up the entire OS. It's highly privileged, right? You can do a lot of things if you can control that firmware layer, right? And oftentimes it is not the most hardened code. It's written 5 years ago, maybe sometimes 10 years ago. They just keep maintaining it and bug fixing it. Not to say it's bad code, but it's not as hardened as the operating system layer. So what the attackers tend to do is, oh, that's an easy target. Let me get in there, implant a malware right in there, in that entire, wherever they land into that path, right? And once they do, the what's insidious about this firmware attacks is that it's happening at a much lower layer. We have no way to detect that. And it's highly privileged code. And it's also highly persistent because every time you reboot the VM, it's not like this malware disappears. It's there, sitting there all the time, and it'll just reboot the machine, but the malware is still there, and it'll control the boot, and it can corrupt the drivers. It can do whatever it wants to do. Imagine you have a house and you crawl underneath the house, and you are not even noticed by anybody, right? And you can just go, change the plumbing or connect the wires in a different way, corrupt the drivers, whatever, right? You can do a lot of things, and you can go completely unnoticed. And that's really what this type of firmware attacks is really what Trusted Launch helps detect and let you know something bad has happened, so you can take action. Not only that, if you're a relaying party, you can take proactive action. In the Azure Virtual Desktop example I gave you, that's just one instance where we can very quickly react to those situations and immediately block the VM right then and there. So you as a customer, can feel, comfortable about the fact that when bad things happen, there are ways to actually quickly react and proactively take action before any further damage is done, right? So I just want to highlight that part. Highlight the firmware attack and the various types of firmware attacks in this slide. And the list is only growing by the day. I keep seeing reports of more and more firmware attacks. It is just what it is. So Trusted Launch is the way to go in terms of being able to detect such firmware attacks and take a proactive action. So really, without complicating things, right? So what do you as a user do to enable Trusted Launch? It is just one click. That's it. You just go, when you create a VM or a virtual machine, Arc virtual machine, you choose security type as Trusted Launch. You see the two green arrows there, and that's it. You're done. And everything else happens in the background, right? And that's powerful. So where are we in this journey? For those of you closely tracking Azure Stack HCI, you will notice that you would have noticed that Trusted Launch for Azure Arc virtual machines was actually released back in January as part of Azure Stack HCI 23H2. What we released as part of Trusted Launch at the time was support for secure boot, virtual TPM, and the ability to migrate the virtual TPM state along with the VM. And those are all already released. It's generally available. And where we are today is building support for, we have actually built support for the boot integrity verification, which I talked to you about a few slides ago. It's currently in preview. And certainly love for you all to, check it out and try it out and give us feedback. And where are we going as we look into the future? Obviously, depending on customer feedback, what we learn from customers and usage, we will mature that feature and eventually take it to a GA or generally available status. Sometime in 2025, it all depends on usage and feedback and making sure we feel good about the in-market data before we, make it generally available. And as I alluded to before, this whole journey of Trusted Launch is not to give you a choice necessarily to go enable Trusted Launch. That is where we start today, because ultimately what we have learned is that when you look at the data from customers, doesn't matter. It's not just about Trusted Launch across the board. How many people really go enable security features in a operating system, for example, right? Interestingly, we find that many customers actually don't, by many, I mean, maybe 30%, 40%, they don't really enable security features for a variety of reasons. Either they don't understand it or something has been working in the past well. They don't want to change anything. They just want to just go not do anything, right? The inertia problem. So for a variety of reasons, the general tendency is for customers to not turn on security features. And we have found over the years that the best way we can protect our customers and help them achieve meaningful security and protect their own workloads or their systems is by enabling security by default. And that's the real way for us to truly protect our customers. And in fact, we talk to customers and chief security officers. They always say, yes, please deliver us platforms that can protect us. And that's effectively the move with Trusted Launch. We do want to enable Trusted Launch by default across the board for Azure Arc VMs. So in the future, hopefully sometime in 2025, you will see this to be a zero-click experience. You will know about Trusted Launch, but you will know that it's auto-enabled by default, and that's it. Right. So that's really where we want to go, but we want to get more customer feedback, make sure we are addressing all of your use cases, and when we get to that level of comfort, we will enable it by default. So that's the journey we are in, and certainly, my intention here is not only to share this all with you, but also answer questions, and engage with you if you're interested in previewing this capability. I'm happy to set up, time with you separately if you want me to go through the details and help preview this capability. So my address is right there on the screen. Take a note and yeah, do reach out to me if you have any questions. Happy to engage with you. That said, I do have a short demo to just give you a flavor of how creating Trusted Launch experience looks like. We still have some time, so I'll just take a few minutes to share that and then hand it back over to Kiana. It's a very short demo. I just want to highlight just the VM creation part so you understand how it looks and how you can verify if the Trusted Launch is enabled on a Arc virtual machine. So let me roll this video and you will see. So what I'm doing here in this demo is really creating a virtual machine, an Azure Arc virtual machine through the portal. Let me roll it. It's a standard experience, right? That's nothing new here. But what you will notice is that there is, you'll soon see there's a security type that I'll be choosing and selecting Trusted Launch. Yeah, see right there, the security type, I've chosen Trusted Launch. And that's it, really. There's nothing more to enabling Trusted Launch. I'm just still going through the creation process here. I'm going to fast track this one. So once you go through the process of creating the VM and the VM is created, the question is, how do I know if the VM that was created is a Trusted Launch Arc VM? And that's what I want to quickly show to you. So you can verify that the VM is Trusted Launch. See here, I'm actually going to the VM page and clicking on the VM. And there you can see here, there's a security section in this page that says Trusted Launch. And this is the experience that we delivered with Azure Stack HCI 23H2 back in January. Now, with the additional capability, the ability to verify boot integrity, we'll have a more expanded view of security where you not only will see security type as Trusted Launch, but you will actually see if the secure boot is enabled, virtual TPM is enabled, and if the virtual machine actually passed the boot integrity test, and if the VM is healthy or not. And the last time it was verified, because this refreshes every 4 to 8 hours. It's not just a one-time thing. So you'll see all of that expanded details in the preview, actually, if you're interested in joining the preview and trying it out. But that's the experience we are building, and love your feedback. Happy to answer any questions here. We still have some time. And if not, feel free to reach out to me as well. Back to you, Kiana.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ram. Let me go ahead and start sharing the presentation again, but that's all we had for our agenda today. Now we're going to open up the floor to you folks who have questions. I know that the Q&A feature was unfortunately not working this call, but again, we have the Q&A session here. So if you have any questions, feel free to come off mute, raise your hand. I will say before we get started, the next call, like I said, every Wednesday, every first Wednesday of every month, the next call will be on the 2nd of October. So feel free to join us then at the same time. But if you have any questions, feel free to unmute, raise your hand. We're happy to be here. Any questions? I know that the Q&A feature is disabled, so I feel like there has to be some questions. But if you don't have any questions right now, we can always, the chat's always open. So you can always ping us in the chat or reach out to the folks that presented. But any last takers for any questions? I do have a poll that I'm going to go ahead and launch. Just trying to track how valuable the information was during this call. And I'm probably going to be running this poll in the future calls as well. But any questions? We still have 10 minutes. Jamie, it looks like you have a question. Thanks for being the first taker.
No worries, thanks. Yeah, I was wondering about the best practice assessments. Do you have any more details to share around that? Like what, is it just Windows Server best practices, or do you look at roles and features like Active Directory or anything like that?
Who is that question geared towards?
I forget the name of the presenter, sorry, but it was the one that threw up the preview for WSAAM.
Yes, Arnav. So Arnav, I don't think is here right now. Arnav had to drop for another call. But if you ping it in the chat, I'll be sure that question gets answered, and we can take that offline.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions for any of the other presenters? Let me go back to the agenda to show you, I guess, what all we had discussed today. I know that there's a lot of information being thrown at you. So any questions regarding Jumpstart, Container Storage Accelerator, or Azure Container Storage enabled by Azure Arc, previously known as Edge Storage Accelerator, server updates. I know that, like I said, Arnav is not on the call right now. Any other questions? Going once, going twice. All right, David, got another taker.
One really quick question. We've got trusted launch, well, I say we, trusted launch for AVS was being spoken about last year. Is there any intent to bring trusted launch on premises using Arc?
Yeah, well, thank you for the question. I just want to clarify. Yeah, this is Ram again. So who was the speaker? I just want to recognize the name. That way I know who it was. David Rowley, is that right? Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So David, your question was, when are we bringing trusted launch to the edge? Is that your question?
Yeah, so if we've got Arc-enabled VMware environments running VMs, are we going to get trusted launch for those devices as well as HCI?
I see. So just I just want to make sure I'm correctly answering the question. So today, three things, right? Azure already has trusted launch. I think we talked about it, and we also talked about the fact that we have brought trusted launch to Azure Arc VMs.
Yep.
On Azure SSH. That part is there, but I think your question really is it coming to VMware as well? Generally to all Azure Arc VMs, not just the ones that are on Azure Stack HCI. Correct, David?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Yes, but that's not currently there. Our vision is to broadly do this for all Azure Arc VMs, but I don't have a particular roadmap to share with you, unfortunately. But yeah, but thank you for the question. That informs us that people do care, and that makes a difference. Yeah.
Thank you.
And yeah, and also those of you listening, and if you sort of piggybacking on David's mind, right? if you have a strong need for seeing this broadly across the board, particularly on a VMware, please do let us know, and that's great feedback as well.
Awesome. Thanks for your question, David. Any other questions from any other folks that are still on the call? Like I said, if you think of something later on, feel free to ping us in the chat. The chat will still be open, which is available through the Teams channel that you all are a part of. If you aren't able to see the chat for some reason, there is a link in the beginning for our GitHub, and you can request to join through there for our specific Teams channel. That may be why you are not seeing the chat, but I have to look into that a little bit further just to verify. But besides that, are there any other questions before we drop off? I know we only have 6 more minutes here, technically.
Yeah, and Kenna, if since we have a few minutes, I do want to just briefly mention that on the trusted launch point, particularly because David was interested in seeing it in VMware, that's definitely one dimension, right? But also I want to point out that trusted launch is not the end game, right? This is the journey of bringing confidential compute that's already on Azure today to the edge, right? And if you look at where Azure is today in their confidential compute journey, if you go back in time 5 years ago, there was just Azure VMs that you create, right? And then in Azure, we introduced Trusted Launch as a capability that was part of the confidential compute roadmap. And then confidential virtual machines came on board, and then confidential, containers and such, and the list goes on, right? So that's all on Azure side. Now, the reason I am referring to that is simply to point out to you that you should certainly stay excited about what's coming down the pike for the edge, because clearly, I think as David was pointing out, there are signals that people do care a lot about security and they want to see it in more places. And I think David's question is more on, is it going to be on VMware, which is a great question. But also I want to point out the other dimension to this, right? It's not just trusted launch. We are definitely thinking long and hard about lot other layers of security that you can apply on the virtual machine. How do you encrypt the virtual machine memory, right? And how do you ensure that the VM disk that the virtual machine has not been tampered with, right? So all these different layers of security that we can add on to the virtual machine, and we are approaching it from the point of view of an attacker, right? So you see, terminologies aside, trusted launch, all of those terminologies aside, what are we really protecting, right? We are protecting customer workloads. That's the business we are in. And if we look at the broadly across the board, what are all the different attacks that we have seen over the years and continuing to happen, right? So, and what are the things we can do technologically to go to prevent or to help detect those attacks and inform the customer? So trusted launch is definitely the first step, and we are building a lot more, and it's part of what we do as a security team. And if there's anything particular in terms of VM security capabilities that you care about, in any particular attacks that you are concerned about, again, please feel to reach out to us, and we'll love to hear your opinions on that. But be assured that we are definitely on a path to adding a lot more than what I just shared with you today. Because ultimately we want to protect against, help protect our customer workloads from a variety of different attacks. And believe me, attackers they have almost infinite compute resources today. I don't know how, but it's a cat and a mouse game. The more we innovate, the more hackers innovate on their end, and it's this game that goes on and on and on. So yeah, we are here to protect our customer workloads. Back to you, Kiana.
Awesome. Thank you, Ram. I know we have 3 minutes left. Any last questions? Always looking for feedback on our call. So the poll that I did put in the chat, it's anonymous. Feel free to fill that out if you can. But any questions before we drop off here? Like I said, if you think of anything else, feel free to ping in the chat, or we can get you in contact with the right folks to answer the questions. But going once, going twice. Alrighty, we'll close it off then today. So thank you everyone for attending connect with us on our GitHub. From there, like I said, you can find all of our previous recordings, all of the previous slide decks, links on how to join the actual Teams channel if you for some reason can't see the chat. And like I said, if we're always welcoming feedback. So if you have any specific topics that you would like to see presented in the future, you can submit the survey there on the link at the bottom. And like I said, feel free to send out the poll, your answer to the poll. All right. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for joining. Have a great Wednesday.
Great. Thank you all.
Thank you.